come to critical illness insurance. What is critical illness insurance? Critical illness insurance is a kind of insurance policy. You're familiar probably if you have a car, auto policy, you have rental policy. This is a relatively new kind of policy. It pays a lump sum of money, okay, tax-free, if you are diagnosed, okay, I've underlined the key words here, okay, 30 days after you are diagnosed with any one of the following illnesses. Cancer, heart attack, stroke. These are the basic ones, okay? All the policies would cover this. All the basic policies would cover this. But in addition to that, there are about 20 odd other illnesses that are covered, okay? If you are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, with benign brain tumor, blindness, coma, find yourself in a coma, coronary bypass. There's a gentleman, an advisor in Halifax in the year 2004 in the evening. He wasn't feeling well. And as the evening progressed, it didn't get better. So the wife sent him to the IWK emergency. IWK, is it IWK that you would go to emergency? Which one? QE2. So he went. His wife says, after supper, go down. And so he goes there, and true story. Okay, his name is Corey Collins, and he goes down to the IWK, and the doctor did some tests, and sorry, QE2, and the doctor did some tests. And he says to him, say your last goodbyes because you're not going to see the morning. He said, what? Are you? He said, no. He said, because your system is shutting down. He says, call who you need to call because he says you're not going to make it into the morning. And this guy is not very old, right? And so, of course, that's what he did. Called his wife, whoever he could get in touch with. And true enough, by the morning, he was in a coma. And he was in a coma for 4 days. Okay? And Corey's a very funny guy. So he says at the end of 4 days, he says he got up and his wife was by his bedside. And he saw the chart, the medical chart. So while she was still there, he looked at the medical chart and he saw the history. He says, various times the wife still there. So then the wife woke up. Then he said to himself, I thought this was a good time to ask her to buy a Harley Davidson. Deafness, HIV infection, kidney failure on dialysis, loss of limbs, loss of speech, severe burns, major organ transplant, waiting list, okay? You keep hearing all these stories where, somebody has something and then they're put on a waiting list. Just want to go through the illnesses: Lou Gehrig's, MS, paralysis, Parkinson's, RO, whatever it is, surgery, anemia, meningitis, angioplasty, heart valve replacement. And then when it comes to cancer, they go into very specific kinds of cancer that they also cover, right? And then the loss of dependence. So I thought perhaps the best way to, personalize this to you was to do the following. In the last 3 years, okay, or let's take 5 years. In the last 5 years, there's how many of us here? Okay, I'm just going to give me a name or a description of someone you know. Okay, if you know the first name, just give me the first name. If you don't know the name, just tell me if it's a neighbor, a friend, a co-worker, or something. What kind of illness, critical illness, he or she had, and how old that person was. Okay, I'll start the ball rolling. On Thursday, I was with my accountant. Okay, and I have two companies. I have a holding company and an operating company, and we're doing the financial statements. And I was sitting down with him, and I was telling him, he was asking me how things were going, and I'm saying I'm doing these workshops, and I'm going to be talking about critical illness on Saturday. He said, it's funny you brought that up. He said in the last 3 months, he said, okay, 3 of my customers, 3 of my clients, he said, were told that they have 6 months to live, okay? And he said the oldest one was 53. And he's a chartered accountant. So he said, you know, the oldest one was 53, so I'm going to put here customers. This particular one, I believe it was cancer. They were all different, but this one was cancer. He was 53 years old. But the reason why he brought that up was he said, it's interesting that you're going to be talking about critical illness insurance. He said, 3 of my customers were told that by their doctors, and they got a second opinion, of course. Let's talk about this one, the 53-year-old, the oldest one. He said that he was told by his doctor that you've got cancer and you've got 6 months to live. So, you know, rearrange your affairs and whatnot. And of course, you know, it was not just his doctor, it was the specialist who told him that. The doctor identified it, went to the specialist. All right. My accountant said to me that this guy and all 3 of them went down to the States, okay, and through a program called Best Doctors, because this business owner, he had a disability policy where he worked. And nowadays, when you buy a health insurance policy as a value add-on, they give you access to Best Doctors. Best Doctors is an organization that if you are diagnosed with something and if you have access to Best Doctors, they will give you a second opinion, and then they'll find the best of the best in the world with that particular problem, right? So he said, because of my disability at work, I had access to Best Doctors, and Best Doctors linked me to somebody in Texas, okay? And so when he was linked to that person, the specialist in Texas, he sent all his docs down, right? And so the specialist told him, look, you have to fly down to Texas. I'd like to examine you myself. And he did. And when he went down to Texas, he had to take 1 or 2 or 3 trips, and you know, of course, there was money involved. He said the prognosis was, there's no problem here. This can be fixed. Okay? And the other 2 were the same thing. They went down to the States, you know, and where they were told that they have 6 months here, it was fixed, right? I asked my accountant, how much was he out of pocket for going down and all of that? He said about $60,000. So he had the means, right? What if he didn't have the means? Okay. Now I can tell you stories and stories because I collect these stories, but you know, it runs home the point, right? So here's my story. Does anybody have a story? Somebody that you know in the last 5 years who was affected by any of those illnesses. Tell me the first name, or you know, what kind of, you know, whether, how you know that person, and whether, how old you think that person was. 4. Heart attack? $43. Okay. Anybody else? Maureen? Maureen, did you say? Okay. A colleague? Okay. And what did she have? Cancer? What kind of cancer, Annie? Breast cancer, okay. And how old was she? 50s. So let's say 55. Well, anybody else? In the last 3 to 5 years, Suzanne? Okay. Late 40s? 50s? 48? Okay. Your dad? Okay. 65? A tumor, right? Brain tumor? Okay, let's just stop there. No, we could, here's my point, okay? Here's my point, that all of us, every one of us, okay, can look back 3 years and we can name names, okay? We know of people who've been affected by the major ones, cancer, heart attack, stroke, and all of the others, right? So there is no discrimination. It's across the board. It's universal. The neighbor that Suzanne is referring to, she has cancer. Her sister is in China, died recently, okay, younger than her, has cancer too, China, okay? So, you know, it's across the board. So here's the thing. So with that, let me move on here. Let me give you some background as to where critical illness came about. It's a relatively new kind of insurance.
was born in Beaufort West, South Africa. The son of a missionary, he spent most of his childhood in one of the country's most deprived areas. Despite this modest upbringing...
Let me start again so that you get all of it.
Dr. Marius Barnard, the creator of critical illness insurance, was born in Beaufort West, South Africa. The son of a missionary, he spent most of his childhood in one of the country's most deprived areas. Despite this modest upbringing, his parents taught him and his brother Christian the benefits of knowledge. Both brothers went on to study medicine and became heart surgeons. On the 3rd of December 1967, he assisted his brother Christian in the first human-to-human heart transplant.
And what is the patient's condition now?
Very well. We are doctors and we try to save a human being's life, and I don't think there's anything special about it.
As a doctor, I diagnose and treat patients. And as I went through medicine over the question of 20, 30 years, I saw tremendous changes, not only in the medical need, but also in the financial needs of our patients. A case that really triggered my ideas was a young divorcee, 34, with 2 young children. The X-rays and biopsy confirmed the diagnosis of lung cancer, and we removed her lung. She went home 5 days later, and 3 weeks later she was back at work. 2 years approximately after the operation, she came to me at my consulting rooms, basically dying on her feet, pale, exhausted, loss of weight, skin and bone, gasping for breath. And I examined her, and it was pretty obvious that she was now in the terminal stages of cancer. Why should she come to my rooms? You know, she can hardly walk. I can see her. She says, "Doctor, I've come from work." Why was she at work? She needed the money. She needed money to provide for her children and herself rent, food, education. She died a few weeks later, and when she was buried, the life insurance policy paid out. Wouldn't it have been better for her to have the money when we diagnosed cancer? That poor little girl had to work until she basically was dead.
This and many other cases like it made Marius realize there was a need for a new type of insurance, one that paid out on the diagnosis of illness, such as cancer, heart attack and stroke. He shared his vision with an insurance company, which then went on to develop the first critical illness insurance policy.
It's really a marriage between medicine and insurance. I always say we as doctors are the physical doctors. The protection insurance is the financial doctors. If you're ill, the first person you'll go to will be if you have a heart attack, to your physical doctor. But I hope at that stage you've already made provisions so that your financial health is in place. So when your physical goes, that you have financial protection to provide you with that money, which is the promise of insurance and the definition of insurance, to give you money when you need it most.
So it was started it came about in Marius' the first one was in South Africa in 1983. It came to North America in the mid-90s. Okay? And so this is relatively new, but it's very relevant. Okay, because prior to that, people, insurance agents were just selling life insurance, which was good for as a death benefit and for retirement purposes. But in between, what if you become disabled or critically ill along the way? And this addresses that. There's a company that prepared a video, which I'm going to show you because I can speak to a lot of things, but because they took a lot of time and trouble to do this, I'm just going to write on its tail. Okay, it'll convey the ideas much better. So I'm going to play another video there.
It happened so fast. One minute I was mowing the lawn, and the next minute I was lying in a hospital bed. There were no symptoms, no warning.
Don't worry about me. I'm coming along fine. I'm just so glad I bought insurance to help me at a time like this, so I didn't put my son's future at risk.
The doc says I'm lucky. That could have been the big one. But if I'm careful, it's mostly a matter of time until I get better.
A stroke, cancer, heart attack. They can be devastating, but we never think it will happen to us. According to the American Heart Association, nearly 5.5 million Americans have survived a stroke, and many of them have to live with a permanent stroke-related disability. And 1,200,000 Americans are going to experience a heart attack within the next year. I didn't know what had happened. Well, in fact, all I did know was that I was in a hospital when I opened my eyes. And Donna was there with tears on her cheek. And my first thought was to tell her I was all right. But I couldn't speak. The doctors told me I had suffered a stroke.
The doctor said we were fortunate. You know, he could have died. But now, with enough care and therapy, things are beginning to get back to normal.
When I got over feeling sorry for myself, I began to think about money. Obviously, I wasn't able to earn an income, and nothing was coming in except the bills. Mortgage, utilities, the credit cards, they don't stop coming in just because I stopped.
A few months before the stroke, Bob bought a critical illness insurance policy. I wasn't in favor of it. I mean, at the time, it was just another bill we had to pay. But Bob said, you never know. Now, I am so thankful that he had the foresight to buy a policy. It has really helped us at this time.
All that was about 10 months ago. I'm now back in the office on a part-time basis and should be back to work full-time within the next few weeks. What happens from here, only time will tell. For Bob and Donna's family, the unimaginable became the imaginable, and their lives have been changed forever. Maria is a single mom with a teenage son.
It should have been the best time of my life. I had fully recovered from my back surgery, I was pain-free, and I had complete freedom of motion. Then, out of the clear blue, I discovered a lump in my breast. Things were going really well at my new job, but because of my back surgery, I couldn't qualify for the disability program offered at work. So, I looked at the alternatives. The company offered a chance for me to buy critical illness insurance through a payroll deduction, and I did. David, my son, was getting ready for college. That was our dream. He finished his freshman year on the dean's list. But that summer, the doctors discovered the lump in my breast was malignant, cancer.
Mom would like to pretend that it was no big deal. She would always say, I've dealt with bigger odds before, and I can beat this. That was her line. She said that all the time. But she reacted really, really bad to chemo, so she couldn't work. She was really sick. So, you know, her medical expenses were pretty much covered, but nothing else. So I wanted to do right by my mother. I told her that I was going to have to quit school and get a job.
When he said that, it really hurt. I wanted David to have more than I ever had. I thought college was his chance. The critical illness policy I bought at work, it really helped. It gave us money so that I could still help pay his tuition, and he didn't have to leave school.
The doctor says that Mom is going to get better, but in the meantime, I'm just going to have to juggle school with my job. You know, I will be a teacher. It's just going to take a little bit longer than I had expected. You know, and she will be able to see me through college and fulfill that dream. It's just going to take a little bit longer.
A dream deferred is better than a dream forgotten. College may be more than 4 years for David, but he will graduate. With the money from the critical illness policy to help pay expenses, David and his mom were able to continue to realize their dream. Sam never thought this could happen, not to him. He's a careful man.
I thought I was so smart. Always lived within my means. Put in lots of overtime to pay for the kids' college so we wouldn't have any loans hanging over our heads after they graduated. Pay as you go, that was my motto. Our house was always one bedroom too small, but it kept expenses down. Never got around to saving, but we were debt-free and I had time. You always joke around about being worth more dead than alive. Well, I've got a lot of life insurance to take care of Anita after I'm gone. But then a friend of mine asked me, what happens if you get sick and don't die? That's when I looked into that new critical illness insurance.
Sam's so easygoing. Nothing bothers him. But when he had his heart attack, it felt like the bottom fell out of our world. It was bad. What little savings we had was gone in the first couple of weeks. Luckily, Sam's critical illness insurance helped pull us through.
It's funny, isn't it? By the time I'm back on my feet, I'll be in my golden years. Right, golden years. Now, Anita's a wonderful woman. She put up with me all her life. If that heart attack had killed me, she'd be looking at castles in France, but it didn't. So she's 52 and looking for a job. But it could be worse, you know. Because I bought critical illness insurance, I'm gonna be fine.
Unfortunately, there's nothing that can prevent the unexpected or the unpredictable illness. But there is an insurance product to help ease the financial problems it leaves behind. Critical illness insurance from American General Life Insurance Company provides a lump sum benefit to help cover expenses when you're diagnosed with a heart attack, stroke, invasive cancer, or other covered conditions under the policy. The money is paid directly to you, so it can be used for direct costs, such as deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance, and policy exclusions, or paid for home health care that's above and beyond your current coverage, or for indirect costs, such as transportation, food, lodging, child care, lost income, or remodeling to make a home for the disabled accessible. Whatever your need might be, you can have an effective solution to help ease the financial burden and allow you to focus on what is important, getting well. Critical illness insurance from American General.
All right, with that, they used actors to do this. So I just want to finish off with a real life story. This is of an agent who walked into his office one day, and when you are working for insurance companies, they provide you with a lot of educational material so that you are able to be equipped to educate others. He walked into his office and he watched a video on critical illness insurance, and he was so inspired by it. He bought a policy not knowing that in a very short time he was going to walk through those waters. So this is his story. So this is a real story.
Good morning. I'm here today to inspire you. I had a chemo treatment on Tuesday, but nothing was to stop me from coming here, because I have a passion now, a passion to inspire agents to sell and buy more coverage. So I'm here to tell you my story. 4 years ago, I was probably in the best shape of my life. I was lifting weights, eating right, and I developed a strange habit of playing basketball from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. 3 days a week with about 20 other idiots at the YMCA. Life was going perfect. I was not only in great shape, my career was taking off, I was making more money than ever. I was spending a lot of time with my children. They were 2 and 4 at the time. And I was doing well enough so my wife could be a stay-at-home mother, which she enjoyed. My life was perfect. In fact, my life had been perfect from the very beginning. As you just heard, my father's name is Gaylord Perry. And what that meant to me as a child, it meant that my childhood was just like a dream. From the time I could walk, I was on the field of major league stadiums, hanging out in the clubhouses with the guys, traveling all over the country with the team. Now, traveling around with 25 major leaguers is like traveling around with 25 large children. They don't have to grow up. They play a game for a living. It was just fantastic to be in that environment as a child. By the time my dad retired when I was 16, I'd been to every stadium. I'd shag flies in Fenway Park. I'd taken bat practice in Yankee Stadium. And I met all the greats. I have so many terrific memories. One of my first memories is being 4 or 5 years old in San Francisco. I remember sitting on my dad's knee in the clubhouse. That's right, my dad played in San Francisco for 10 years with the first name Gaylord. Attendance was up when he pitched. He thought it because he was good, but it was because he was good looking. I remember sitting on my dad's knees having a bowl of ice cream because he had just won a game. That's how he celebrated. And I remember him telling me to go over to Willie Mays' locker. Willie Mays, who a lot of people consider to be the greatest player of all time. He told me to go over to his locker and grab his ice cream and bring it back to him. Now, the funny part of this story is about 15 years after that, I was reintroduced to Willie Mays. My dad and I walk up to him, and my dad says, "Hey, Willie, remember little Jack?" And I'll have to paraphrase what Mr. Mays said. He said, "Get the blank out of here. This little blanky blank used to steal my blank and ice cream." And evidently he was still upset about the ice cream incident and didn't like the fact that I was a foot taller than him. Now, I share with you my childhood and what my life was like 4 years ago to make you realize things didn't go wrong in my life. I had a charmed life. And there are probably some of you out here today that don't have a critical illness policy because you're that mindset that you're having a charmed life and nothing could go wrong in your life. Well, I want those of you who don't have a policy to really listen to my story. I walked into my office one day, May of 2001, decided to watch a video about critical illness insurance. In that video, he was talking to a group like us, and he asked 2 questions. The first one was, who do you know who's had cancer, heart attack, stroke in the last 5 years? The people wrote down the names, the age of the diagnosis, what they're diagnosed with. And a few minutes later, they read that list. And it went something like this. One lady said, my sister had a heart attack at 32. Another one said, my neighbor had cancer at 40. Third one, my uncle had a stroke at 45. Now that caught my attention. I was 33 years old. I thought these things happened to people in their 60s and 70s. So that caught my attention. And then he asked a question that changed my life. He said, who planned to be on that list? Who planned to be on that list? I realized at that moment that nobody plans to be on the list. Whether you're 33 years old, 6'8", in great shape, no family history of anything, or if you're 5'8", in terrible shape, and 58 years old, it doesn't matter. No one plans to be on that list. It was an aha moment for me. I stopped the video, filled out an application, had the physical on May 24th, passed with flying colors. Didn't think twice about it. I knew I was in great shape. It was a month later, I took my wife to the Bahamas for our anniversary. And it was there that I started noticing strange pains in my hips, in my lower back, my ear. So being a typical male and being in the Bahamas, I just ordered a few Bahama Mamas, downed those, and the pain went away. So I self-medicated for the rest of the trip. Then I went home, and the pains would come back about once a week. I guess I was in denial. I was an athlete in college, and I had that mindset that I'd be okay. However, one Saturday morning, I woke up and I could barely walk, and my wife took me to the emergency room. They admitted me, and they ran about 10 tests. The last one was a bone marrow biopsy, where they take a skinny little corkscrew, stick it in the small of your back, and pull out a sample of your bone marrow. Really quite pleasant. They sent me home, and the next day, August 1st, 68 days after my physical, my doctor called me and told me I had leukemia. Now, I remember what chair I was sitting in when I got the news, and I remember what my first thoughts were. My first thought was, I can handle this. I was raised to be very positive. So I already had that attitude going, I can handle this. My second thought was my critical illness policy. My wife's a stay-at-home mother. My children are 2 and 4. My most important job in the world is to take care of my family. How was I going to be able to do that? Even though I was doing pretty well in sales, just like most people in their early 30s, didn't have much in savings. If I couldn't work for a year, how were we going to pay the mortgage? How was I going to handle the expenses? I finally got out of the hospital after about a month. And even though I was out of the hospital, my treatments didn't end. And it's very, very important as insurance people, as insurance agents, that we understand what treatments are like. I think of a lot of you, maybe a lot of people in general think, well, if I have cancer, I'll be sick for a month or so, and I might miss 2 months of work. That's usually not the case, folks. The way my treatments went for the next 6 months was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. What that means is Monday morning, my wife drives me to the hospital. I get chemotherapy. It could be a shot, could last 5 seconds. It could be 3 or 4 IV bags full of this stuff. It could last 3 or 4 hours. Monday afternoon, I go home. Monday night, it's no other way to put it, I'll start throwing up. Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, I check into the hospital because I can't stop. Feel better by Friday, go home Friday. Monday, do the same thing for 6 months. The 2 weeks that you're off, you're so beat up from the 2 weeks you were on, you can't do anything. I didn't work a day. I could barely take care of myself some days. Well, that went on for 6 months, and then on February 24th, 2002, I got what I thought was my last chemo treatment ever. And I remember as I'm throwing up, violently ill for maybe the 75th time or so, kind of had a smile on my face. Because about 3 weeks later, I took my wife back to the Bahamas. And this time she drank the Bahama Mamas, and I took care of her. Now, how do you think that made me feel? Think about what my wife had been through. She didn't know if I was going to live or die. She's taking care of the kids, taking care of the house. She is stressed out. And I took her to the Bahamas, and she sat in the sand, and I sat in the sand, and I looked at the ocean, and I thought, Jack, you're a damn genius. The reason I thought that is because during one of my hospital stays, my wife walked into the room with tears in her eyes and gave me a check for $130,000. I was high on morphine at the time. And I looked at the check and I thought it said $1.3 million. I was extremely happy for about 5 seconds. But I was able to take my wife to the Bahamas, and then over the next 9 months or so, I took my family on 4 vacations, a week long each one. I didn't go back to work. I didn't need to go back to work. You know why? Had money in the bank. I worked about 15 hours a week. It was glorious. I thought I was making up for lost time, but unfortunately, I was creating memories that I would need for a difficult year ahead. Because right before Christmas, the pains returned in the back, in the ear. And I knew what it was before I went to the doctor. I knew it was back. And when leukemia comes back a second time, they usually go for a stem cell transplant. Now, the closest hospital for stem cell transplant was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, 3 hours away. How was I going to afford to pay my mortgage in Charlotte and pay for an apartment for my wife in Chapel Hill? How was I going to do that? I had money in the bank. Had money in the bank. So that's my story, my ongoing story, as you can tell by my head, of a critical illness. I learned a lot through this. I learned to trust in God. I learned to enjoy every day. Thank God, or be happy every day that you have good health. Don't take it for granted. And you know, I learned a lot about insurance. I thought I knew a lot about insurance. I learned a lot about what insurance is not as well. Insurance is not your commissions. It's not shiny brochures. It's not numbers. It's not prices. Insurance is basically, as it's been said a lot of times today, is being there for your client or yourself when you need it the most. After this long illness, my wife is still a stay-at-home mother. We're still in our home. We still live in a neighborhood that my kids love. You know, I never had to make that dreaded list, that list of friends and family to call, to ask for money.
All right, so here's some statistics. 1 in 3 people are going to be affected by cancer. 1 in 4 people are going to be affected by heart attack or heart disease. 1 in 20 will have a stroke, okay? And these are just the biggies, right? We've got 25 other illnesses that they're there that just show up, when you least expect it, right? So the odds are not in your favor. So please get critical illness insurance. Any questions?
Well, good morning. Okay, so I had my group insurance up to last year because my hours changes, so they took me out of it. Where exactly, when you said you have to get at individual ones, do you recommend any places where you can get it, or do I have to go to my company again and say I want to get my individual ones?
The individual insurance you can get in many places, okay? Now, one of the things that we did when we approached churches to educate people, so that one of the reasons why they allowed us to come in here is because we said that we will not solicit business. Okay? Our role here is to educate you. But in saying that, we also want you to know that we do these things. Okay? That's our bread and butter. So you can come to us, you can go online. Okay? If you know of people who are financial advisors, you can deal with them. There's many sources that you can get this. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Moni.
On that note, let's give the mic back to Austin. Let's just redo his question once more because I want to. So ask the question again, Austin.
Okay. My question was, if I had group insurance, does it cover step 2 of the financial plan?
Rush, yes, it does because it's minimal amount. Okay. And then later on, when we come to step number 6, that's when we address it fully. Again, just to reiterate, okay, group insurance. We acknowledge it because they will have to pay. But the only problem with group insurance is you have no control over it. Okay? You leave the employment, you leave the insurance behind. Okay? And even the employers don't have control over it in case you lose your job. Right? Because when you lose your job, guess what? You've lost your income. You're not going to incur expenses. You're trying to keep your expenses as low as possible. In as much as most group insurance policies allow you a conversion privilege to a private insurance. Most people don't do it because that's not the time that they want to be increasing the expenses. You follow? But if you do not have group insurance coverage, like in your case, get it. Okay? And like I said, through us or through online. Okay, there's many places you can go, and just ask around. Financially, there's a lot of your institutions where you do your banking. They all have right? Okay. Any other questions?
My question is with the debt snowball.
Right.
Well, I know you're talking about the critical insurance, critical illness insurance, but would you recommend things like balance protector on loans? Or
Absolutely, absolutely. When you, before you get to step number 6, right? One of the ways that if you do carry debt, anytime you carry debt, right, you want to make sure that it is insured for life and for critical illness and for disability. So that if you run out of time or if you run out of health, that loan is, that you don't live a mess for somebody else, all for yourself, okay? For now, okay? And then when you finish step number 4 and you come to step number 6, then we will sit down and tweak it. You follow? Then we're going to look at, what's the best way to do this. So we will go out there and get a critical illness policy, and we can get rid of this. Because chances are, the ones that you get through your creditor protection, is you don't have control over it. It tends to be exorbitant in cost. You really have it's a blanket coverage for all the creditors. You follow? When you get your own, then you can tailor and customize it to you. And if you're sitting with a financial advisor, we can do the shopping around for you. Make sure that it really suits you. All right? Any other questions? If you have no questions, I just want to close off with a few closing remarks, okay? It is imperative, okay, that you have a financial goal, that you have a financial plan, and that you have a system to stay focused on the goal and on the plan, okay? Just like breathing, sometimes we take it for granted, but try stop breathing. It'll get your attention very quickly. You follow? So similarly, the managing of finances, we want to keep our perspective right, in the context, right, where it fits in the grand scheme of things, okay, but we do not want to neglect this, okay, because if it does, it can play havoc with your life, okay, in terms of the stresses that it will cause, okay. The Bible says that, poverty will come on you like a bandit, like poverty and scarcity will come on you like a bandit and like an armed man, okay, if you're not careful, right? And bandits and armed men, when they come on you, they don't announce it, they just show up, okay, and they catch you, off guard, right? So in Proverbs 6:11, it says that, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a bandit, and scarcity like an armed man. And then in Proverbs 24, verse 30, it says the same. 34, it says the same thing. A little sleep, a little slumber, and poverty will come on you like a bandit, and scarcity like an armed man. All right. With that, I thank you so much for coming out. I know this is Saturday morning. I know this is summertime. I know you had choices for your time, but you took the time to come here, and I commend you for doing that, okay? Because this is extremely important. And I've designed it in a way that it's the least encroachment upon your time, okay? Because I know you've got a life, you've got stuff that you want to do, all right? Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you on October the 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. October the 16th is our next session. Right? There are feedback forms. Give us your email address, and we will make sure that you get 1 or 2 reminders from us. We also blanket it through the group, the young adults. And one of the ways that you can help us is by being our advocates, okay? If you found value in what you've seen here, in the course of the next 90 days, believe me, the talk of money and debt and financial insecurity comes up, like it or not, around the dinner table with your friends and whatnot. Make it a point to bring them along, okay? And also non-believers, because when they come into the house of the Lord, guess what? They just might bump into the Lord, right? So they're going to rub shoulders with you, and we'll help plug the financial gaps. But there are spiritual gaps. People are walking around with spiritual holes in the middle of their lives. All right? get a chance to rub shoulders with you. Thank you so much for coming in, and have a great afternoon.